We were very happy to note the enthusiasm that China has for enhancing cooperation between itself and ASEAN. As mentioned by Secretary Purisima, there are many proposals, very specific, about how we can move forward with the China-ASEAN relationship. And it's also China, Japan, and Korea have also supported ASEAN initiatives for increased connectivity. The other thing that the Philippines has been pushing aside from connectivity is disaster management. The President has been talking constantly about this in his bilaterals and in the summits. He will continue to talk about this more. But in light of what happened to us last week and to what happened to Indonesia earlier this week, the President feels that this is the perfect time to call for enhanced cooperation on regional disaster management. And so he's making that push more aggressively now. And I think we're going to see a lot of receptiveness on the part of our neighbors here, particularly after what happened in Indonesia. So that is the official portion of what's been happening over the last day and a half with President Aquino. If you have questions now. Yeah.
Did President Aquino discuss any other areas of cooperation with His Majesty last night? Potentially in the agricultural field or maybe to solving the territorial dispute?
Well, there was broad discussion about agriculture, but nothing specific proposed. We did say that Mindanao, which is close to Brunei, the closest portion of the Philippines to Brunei, has tremendous potential in terms of food production. And we said, I think Secretary Purisima also echoed that we hope that one day to be able to supply the food requirements of Brunei. But of course, you know, there are issues pending in Mindanao that need to be resolved before you can really begin to increase agricultural productivity there. His Majesty seemed rather pleased at that and expressed some openness to doing that, to allowing us to send more food exports to Brunei. There was, of course, the PPP conference in the mosque. It was a very short meeting. It was really more of President Aquino. A lot of the bilaterals that you're seeing are really more of President Aquino introducing himself to his counterparts in the region. And so you'll see that different levels of specificity with regard to proposals. In the case of Brunei, it was really more for the two leaders to get to know each other and be comfortable. And I think they'll have more opportunities to do that in the coming months.
In addition, I think to what Ricky mentioned, we talked about working to make Mindanao, after the peace agreement is signed, to be a halal food production center to serve not only Brunei but also the Middle East. And secondly, we discussed that it's important that two countries work together to try and preserve the Coral Triangle, of which Brunei became a member to last year, to use it also for tourism in a responsible manner. And third, to explore a similar arrangement to what Thailand has with Brunei in terms of food production.
I wonder if more discussion about Myanmar Burma over last night's dinner and also in the human meetings today.
The President mentioned it again last night at the dinner. He talked about the need for a credible election in Myanmar and expounded in general about the points that he raised earlier in the bilateral. So there was some discussion about that.
Could you elaborate more about if you can?
Well, it was the same as what happened in the bilateral, the need for a credible and free election in Myanmar, and calls of the international community to free political prisoners, including Aung San Suu Kyi.
What is the response by the Myanmar government?
Well, there didn't, again, seem to be any clear response to that at the dinner last night. I'm not sure if they're expected to elaborate on that. We've got another day to go, so there's still time.
To Secretary Purisima. You mentioned about increasing bilateral currency swaps. Can you elaborate on this? Is it the Chiang Mai initiative to be increased, or?
Well, the Premier did not make any details. He just mentioned that as his third point, it's important that we work towards opening of the financial and capital markets to help strengthen each other's financial market. And one of the points he said was to increase the bilateral currency swap. I think he's referring to the Chiang Mai initiative, but he didn't get, he didn't share details on how much he's proposing to increase it.
Did he mention anything about the yuan being stronger and American?
He did not. He did not mention.
I was going to bring it up, the issue of currency and concerns about currency appreciation in the region.
Not in those terms, but it was mentioned that by the Philippines that it's important that ASEAN and China work towards resolving some of the ongoing issues related to currencies and ongoing economic situation.
In the future, the code of conduct. How did the discussion on South China Sea go? What did China say, or how did the discussion?
This was actually the last point, closing remark of the Premier. I think it was in reaction to some of the comments of the ASEAN leaders. Several of them mentioned the importance of making sure that the issues in the area are resolved in a peaceful manner, and that the South China Sea be an area of cooperation and prosperity, and that access to international maritime lanes be maintained. So that was echoed by several of the leaders, and then in the closing remarks of the Premier, he said that China is serious about implementing the DOC.
Secretary, what progress exactly does the Philippines expect when the working group meeting on the South China Sea and the TOC meet in China later this year? What kind of progress do we want to see?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what progress we want to see. As I've said before, ultimately we want everyone to abide by a code of conduct. As I've said before, it's not binding at this point. The fact that everybody's working together to sort of flesh out the details, I think if everybody is on board with the way this evolves, then at some point we do expect ultimately the claimant countries to be able to sign on to a binding commitment. But this is just the process that's going on, and again, as long as everybody's on board and they're providing their inputs and they're satisfied with the outcome, then the chance that everybody will agree to be bound by a code of conduct is greater. So this is one of many steps that we think moving forward will hopefully result in a code that everybody can say that yes, we will agree to abide by this, more categorically than say the simple declaration that we have now.
When they meet in December, they will be discussing the guidelines to implement the DOC, the COC, and it's to implement projects. Do we have other projects lined up for joint projects for the Spratlys area? And is this an indication that because there are conflicting views on how to go about the guidelines, is this an indication that ASEAN and China have basically agreed on how to craft the guidelines to make it to implement it?
No, I think we're still in the process of working that out. As you know, there are different degrees of where you're coming from. The different claimants have different perspectives where they're coming from. And what these meetings will do is, I hope that they'll find out what the common ground is. But when you talk about joint projects, I think it's important first for everyone to agree to a code of conduct before we move forward with other initiatives. It's important first that we all agree on the ground rules before we go off and start doing deals with different countries with regard to that. Anything else? Yeah, sorry.
Just one last question for me. Will President Aquino be planning to visit Brunei anytime soon?
There's nothing definite at this point. We would be happy to do that in the future if it's going to build ties with Brunei. We're eager to strengthen our ties with Brunei, but there's nothing definite at this point. Jim?
How does the Philippines see the entry of the U.S. and Russia to the East Asian market? Some analysts they see it as ASEAN's counterbalance to China and the EU?
Well, the US and Russia have interest in this part of the world, and their inclusion in the East Asia Summit, I think, is a recognition of those interests. And as President Aquino said earlier before he went into the luncheon, he says that we're hoping that the entry of these two parties will help enhance dialogue and cooperation. So we view it as a positive development.
Sir, will President Aquino still push through with his bilateral meeting with the Chinese premier?
We're still waiting word from that. I was just with DFA an hour ago, and there seems to be some scheduling problems. You know, the president has a very tight schedule here. We've got a lot of bilaterals and summits to attend, and we're still trying to find a common schedule. But as of an hour ago, there was no definite schedule yet. Thanks. Okay, thank you everybody, and we'll see you at the next briefing.